Humans, always in the way, always so fragile looking, always so numerous. I Zenek Vartul, third diplomatic attaché to the Galactic Confederation's Earth Embassy, was having what humans might call a day. Not a good day. Not a bad day. Just a day. The kind where you wake up feeling like your secondary respiratory system is clogged with the dust of 1,000 moons and your chrono alarm failed to buzz at the right time. Late. I was going to be late for the interspecies cultural exchange meeting. Ambassador Trelvik would notice my absence, and there would be that slow, disappointed rotation of her eye stalks that made even the most hardened Yorvian warrior feel like a freshly hatched larva. Move. Move. I muttered to myself, hurrying down the crowded sidewalk of New York City. Earth had been part of the Galactic Confederation for precisely 3 standard years, 2 months and 17 days. That was just long enough for humans to get used to seeing aliens walking among them, but not quite long enough for them to understand proper sidewalk etiquette when faced with a hurrying Drexian diplomat late for an important meeting. The human masses parted reluctantly before me. Some gawking, some pointedly looking away. I'm not what you'd call conventionally attractive by human standards. 7 feet tall, exoskeleton the color of what humans call burnt sienna, 4 arms and mandibles that click when I'm anxious, and boy was I clicking today. Click click click. My communit pinged. Attaché Vartul, your presence is required immediately. The human delegation has arrived early. Ambassador Trelvik's voice had that perfectly neutral tone that somehow conveyed depths of disapproval. Yes, Ambassador, en route. Minor delay due to atmospheric conditions. A lie but a small one. It had been a perfectly clear day. I just couldn't get my 4th eye to focus properly during my morning ablutions. Click click click. The crosswalk sign turned to what humans call the walking person, and the crowd surged forward. I moved with them, my longer legs giving me an advantage. Just 30 more of these human blocks and I would reach the embassy. 29 if I cut through Central Park, which I absolutely planned to do. That's when I saw her. A human female, walking with infuriating slowness, tapping at her communication device as if the fate of galaxies depended on whatever trivial message she was composing. Right in the middle of the pedestrian walkway. Right in my way. Excuse me, I said using my most polite human English vocalization. No response, she continued her slow meandering path completely oblivious. Excuse me. I tried again, louder this time. A few humans turned to look but not her. The clicking of my mandibles increased in tempo. Click. 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 My communit pinged again. Vartul, the humans are asking for you specifically. Something about your cultural presentation on Drexian mating rituals. What did you promise them? Oh no. I had forgotten entirely about the presentation I had agreed to give. A wave of hot panic washed over me, turning my exoskeleton a shade darker. Be there momentarily, Ambassador, I replied, my voice modulator barely maintaining a professional tone. I needed to move now. The human female continued her glacial pace, still absorbed in her device. I made a quick calculation. If I sidestepped around her, I risked colliding with an elderly human male using a mobility assistance device. If I waited for her to notice me, I might as well resign my diplomatic position and apply for work as a waste reclamation specialist back on Drexia 4. So I did what any reasonable, slightly panicked Drexian would do. I reached out with my lower right arm and gave her a gentle shove on the shoulder. Pardon me, human, but diplomatic emergency, I said as I made contact. Time seemed to slow. The human female's head turned, her eyes widening as she noticed me for the first time, but instead of moving aside as any sensible being would, she did something completely unexpected. She moved. Not away from me, toward me. In a fluid motion that my 4 eyes barely tracked, she shifted her weight, pivoted her hips and, next thing I knew, I was looking up at the blue earth sky, my back flat against the hard concrete. All 4 of my arms splayed out uselessly, my mandibles frozen mid-click. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. The human female's face appeared above me, her expression conveying what humans call horror. It was a reflex. I didn't mean to. Are you okay? I tried to respond, but my voice modulator seemed temporarily offline. A small crowd of humans had gathered around us, many holding up their devices. no doubt recording my humiliation for whatever primitive social sharing platforms they used. Give him some space, folks, the human female was saying, waving her arms. He's a diplomat. Show some respect. How did she know I was a diplomat? Oh, my embassy insignia, prominently displayed on my chest as required by Confederation protocol. I'm functional, I finally managed to say, my voice coming out with an embarrassing warble. I attempted to rise, which proved more difficult than anticipated. The human female extended her hand to assist me. Let me help you up. I'm Jessica, by the way. Jessica Parker. And I really am sorry. 8 years of martial arts training kicks in sometimes before my brain does. I accepted her assistance, noting with scientific interest how strong her grip was despite her comparatively delicate human anatomy. I am Zenak Vartul, 3rd Diplomatic Attaché to the Galactic Confederation's Earth Embassy, I said formally, attempting to salvage some dignity from the situation. And I apologize for the physical contact. It was inappropriate. No kidding, Jessica said, but her tone didn't match the severity of her words. Her face was doing that thing humans do when they are trying not to laugh. Look, are you in a hurry, because you seem like you are in a hurry. My unit chose that moment to ping again. Vartul, where are you? Jessica's eyebrows raised. That sounds important. It is, I admitted. I'm late for a cultural exchange meeting where I'm supposed to present on certain aspects of Drexian biology. And I just judo flipped you onto the sidewalk, Jessica nodded thoughtfully. Not great for interstellar relations. Tell you what, let me make it up to you, I will get you to your meeting. Before I could protest, she had flagged down one of the yellow ground vehicles that humans use for public transportation.
Taxi.
Unplaza as fast as you can. Diplomatic emergency, she told the driver, practically shoving me into the back seat and climbing in after me. The driver, a human male with facial hair that would make a Juraxian fur beast jealous, barely glanced at us in his rearview mirror. Unplaza, got it. Diplomatic emergency, huh? That why your friend here is turning purple? I realized with embarrassment that my exoskeleton was indeed shifting to a deep purple hue, a Drexian stress response I usually had better control over. I am not purple, I insisted. Despite clear evidence to the contrary, this is a natural chromatoric reaction to unexpected stimuli. He's turning purple because I accidentally flipped him onto the sidewalk when he was trying to get past me, Jessica explained cheerfully. I feel terrible about it. You flipped him. The driver's eyes widened in the mirror. Like martial arts style? Reflexively, Jessica said. I didn't mean to. Reflexively, the driver repeated, sounding impressed. Lady, remind me never to startle you. It was not a flip, I said stiffly. It was a momentary loss of equilibrium resulting from an anticipated shift in my center of gravity. Jessica and the driver exchanged a look that I couldn't interpret but suspected was at my expense. The vehicle lurched forward into traffic, weaving between other ground transports with a disregard for safety protocols that made all 4 of my eyes widen. So, Jessica said conversationally, what kind of cultural presentation are you late for? I shifted uncomfortably. It is a sensitive topic. Hit me, she said. I recoiled in horror. I would never. Physical violence against humans is strictly prohibited by Confederation protocols, especially after the handshake incident of 2089. Jessica laughed, a sound like the tinkling of small bells. It's just an expression, it means tell me. I was still getting used to human idioms. It is a presentation on Drexian reproductive practices. The driver made a choking sound. You mean, alien sex? Jessica asked, her eyes widening with interest rather than disgust, which was refreshing. We prefer the term genetic material exchange procedures, I corrected primely, but essentially yes. And you are going to explain this to a room full of humans. That is my assignment. Yes. Jessica leaned back in her seat.
Well, now I feel even worse about flipping you. That's a tough audience even on a good day.
It was not a flip, I muttered, but my hearts weren't in it. My communit pinged yet again, I checked it reluctantly. Vartul. We have stalled as long as we can. The human delegation is getting restless. Where are you? 2 minutes from destination, Ambassador, I replied. Minor transportation issue. I looked at Jessica. I must ask, how did you execute that maneuver? The physics seemed improbable. Aikido, she said. It's all about using your opponent's momentum against them. You pushed me, I redirected your energy, and she mimicked an explosion with her hands. Down you went. Fascinating, I said, and meant it. The tactical applications. It's not really about fighting, Jessica interrupted. It's about harmony and balance, using minimal force for maximum effect. Like diplomacy, I said, a light bulb moment occurring in all four of my brain lobes simultaneously. Exactly like diplomacy. Jessica agreed, looking pleased. The taxi screeched to a halt. Plaza, the driver announced, that will be $27.50. I reached for my credit chip, but Jessica was faster. My treat, she insisted. Least I can do after assaulting a diplomat. It was not assault, I said automatically. It was an instructive moment in cross-species communication. Jessica grinned. That's very diplomatic of you. As we exited the vehicle, I checked my chronometer. 1 minute until my scheduled presentation. My exoskeleton shifted from purple back to its normal sienna. Perhaps this day was salvageable after all. Thank you for your assistance, I told Jessica formally. I must proceed with haste. Hold up, she said, falling into step beside me. I'm coming with you. I stopped mid-stride. That is not possible. The meeting is restricted to diplomatic personnel and invited guests only. Then invite me, she said simply. Look, I have studied interspecies communication at NYU. I speak 3 non-human languages, and I just saw you panic about giving a presentation on Drexian reproductive practices to a human audience. I can help. I hesitated. On one appendage, bringing an unauthorized human to a diplomatic meeting was a breach of protocol. On the other 3 appendages, I was about to discuss the most intimate details of Drexian biology with a room full of humans who might have no context for understanding it. Very well, I decided. But you will be introduced as my cultural consultant. Deal, Jessica said, looking entirely too pleased with herself. We hurried through security, my diplomatic credentials easing our way, though the human guards gave Jessica curious looks. I led her through the winding corridors of the embassy, past curious stares from both human and alien personnel. Quick primer, I whispered as we approached the meeting room. Humans find certain aspects of Drexian reproduction disturbing. Like what? Jessica whispered back. The consumption of the male's head during the climactic phase of genetic material exchange is often met with expressions of horror. Jessica stumbled slightly. You eat heads? Only ceremonially, and only in traditional pairings. Modern Drexians use synthetic substitutes. But the principle remains important to our cultural identity. Right, Jessica said, looking slightly pale. Anything else I should know? The spawning sacs can be troubling to the uninitiated, and the scent glands tend to trigger the human gag reflex. Awesome, Jessica muttered but squared her shoulders. I can work with this. We reached the meeting room doors just as my comm unit pinged one final time. Vatul, we are starting without you. I took a deep breath through my primary respiratory system. Ready? I asked Jessica. Born ready, she replied, though I knew that was biologically impossible. I pushed open the doors and we entered the room together. All eyes, stalks and sensory appendages turned toward us. Ambassador Trelvik's eye stalks rotated slowly in my direction, her disapproval radiating like a small sun. The human delegation, a collection of diplomats and scientists in formal attire, looked curious and slightly impatient. Ambassador, esteemed delegates, I began, my voice modulator steady despite my internal turmoil. I apologize for my tardiness. I was delayed by an enlightening cultural exchange with my consultant, Jessica Parker, who has kindly agreed to assist in today's presentation. Jessica gave a small wave. Ambassador Trelvik's eye stalks swiveled toward her, then back to me. An unorthodox addition. Attaché Vartul, the ambassador said coolly, but perhaps a human perspective will be valuable for this particular topic. I could sense the question in her tone. How had I acquired a human cultural consultant in the 20 minutes since she'd last communicated with me? But there was no time to explain. Indeed, Ambassador, I agreed smoothly. And now, with your permission, I shall begin my presentation on Drexian genetic material exchange procedures, traditions and modern adaptations. I activated my data tablet and projected the first image onto the large screen behind me. A detailed anatomical diagram of Drexian reproductive anatomy appeared, causing several humans to shift uncomfortably in their seats. One human female in the front row made a small choking sound. Jessica stepped forward smoothly. Perhaps before we dive into the anatomical details, we might benefit from some cultural context. Understanding the emotional and social significance of these practices could help frame the biological aspects in a more relatable way. I stared at her. It was a brilliant suggestion. Why hadn't I thought of it? An excellent proposal, I said, quickly shifting to my cultural slides. The exchange of genetic material in Drexian culture is not merely a biological imperative, but a deeply spiritual practice dating back to our pre-space civilization era. As I spoke, I noticed the humans relaxing, their expressions shifting from apprehension to genuine interest. Jessica occasionally interjected with comparative observations about human cultures, building bridges of understanding I hadn't known were possible. By the time I reached the more graphic and anatomical sections, the groundwork had been laid. The head consumption was presented as a symbolic act of ultimate union rather than a grotesque oddity. The spawning sacs were contextualized as sacred vessels of new life. Even the scent glands were reframed as complex communication tools rather than offensive biological weapons. When the presentation concluded, there was a moment of silence, then enthusiastic applause from the human delegation. Ambassador Trelvik's eye stalks were fully extended in what I recognized as an expression of surprise and approval. Most illuminating, Attaché Vartul, the head of the human delegation said, rising to shake my hand in their customary greeting. I believe this presentation has advanced our understanding significantly. Ambassador Trelvik approached us as the delegates began to disperse. Impressive recovery, Attaché, she said quietly. Your cultural consultant proved quite valuable, though I am curious how you came to meet Miss Parker. I felt my exoskeleton beginning to shift toward purple again. It is a rather unusual story, Ambassador. He shoved me on the street, so I flipped him onto his back, Jessica said cheerfully. Basic Aikido. Then I felt bad and offered to help. Ambassador Trelevik's eye stalks rotated slowly toward me. You physically engaged with a human civilian. And she subdued you? There was no subduing, I protested weakly. It was a cultural misunderstanding that led to a mutually beneficial exchange of perspectives. I see, Ambassador Trelvik said, though her tone suggested she saw rather more than I was comfortable with. Miss Parker, the embassy could benefit from more direct cultural insights such as yours. Would you be interested in a more formal consulting arrangement? Jessica's eyes widened. I would be honored. Ambassador. Excellent. Attaché Vartul will handle the details as he seems to have a unique rapport with you already. With that, Ambassador Trelevik glided away, leaving me staring after her in disbelief. Did I just get a job? Jessica asked. It appears so, I said, feeling strangely pleased despite the odd circumstances. Though I suspect I will never hear the end of how we met. About that, Jessica said, looking suddenly serious. I really am sorry. I have been trained to react that way to unexpected contact. It wasn't personal. No apology necessary, I assured her. In fact, I believe I should thank you. Without your intervention, this presentation would likely have been a diplomatic disaster. So I saved interstellar relations by judo flipping you onto the sidewalk, Jessica grinned. Wait until I tell my mom. She thought the self-defense classes were a waste of money. It was not a flip, I insisted one last time, though I could feel my mandibles clicking in what humans might recognize as amusement. Jessica laughed. Whatever helps you sleep at night, Zinek. Speaking of which, do Drexians sleep? Or do you enter some kind of regenerative stasis? Or wait, let me guess, you hang upside down like bats? I sighed. Perhaps we should discuss Drexian sleep habits over what humans call lunch. I find I have developed an appetite after all this diplomacy. It's a date, Jessica said, then quickly added. I mean, not a date, just a figure of speech. Unless Drexians don't have the concept of romantic dates, in which case, never mind. And now I'm babbling. I found her sudden discomfort oddly endearing. We have similar concepts, though they typically involve more ceremonial grooming and fewer food rituals. As we walked together toward the embassy exit, I reflected on the strange turn this day had taken, from a disastrous beginning to what appeared to be the start of an interesting cross-species friendship, or perhaps something more if I was interpreting human social cues correctly. One thing was certain. I would need to be more careful about shoving humans in the future, particularly this human. My comm unit pinged with a message from Ambassador Trelvik. Impressive recovery, Vartul. The human delegation is quite taken with your presentation approach. Cultural consultant was a stroke of genius. Perhaps being knocked down was exactly what you needed. I glanced at Jessica, who was animatedly describing some human custom involving fortune cookies and first dates. Perhaps the ambassador was right. Sometimes finding yourself flat on your back is exactly the new perspective you need. That's when Jessica turned to me with a mischievous glint in her eye. So, about those synthetic head substitutes. I felt my exoskeleton flush a deep purple. This was going to be an interesting cultural exchange indeed. I still cannot believe you asked Ambassador Trelvik about spawning sack decoration traditions, I said, mandibles clicking rapidly in mortification as Jessica and I exited the small cafe where we just had what humans call lunch. 3 standard Earth weeks had passed since the infamous sidewalk incident, and Jessica's subsequent hiring as a cultural consultant to the Confederation Embassy. In that time she had managed to simultaneously impress and horrify every diplomatic delegation that crossed her path. What? It's a legitimate cultural question, Jessica defended, grinning as she sipped her bubble tea. A bizarre human concoction containing gelatinous spheres that resembled Jorvian egg clusters to an unsettling degree. Besides, she seemed happy to explain it. I think she likes me. Ambassador Trelvik does not like anyone. I corrected. She merely tolerates some beings with greater patience than others. She likes me, Jessica insisted. She invited me to that Drexian holiday thing next week. What's it called again? The Festival of 17 Moons? The Convergence of the 7 Moons, I corrected, feeling my exoskeleton warm slightly. And that is unusual. The convergence is traditionally reserved for Drexians and their significant companions. Jessica nearly choked on a tapioca ball. Wait, did the ambassador just assume we are dating? The concept of dating does not translate precisely to Drexian relationship structures, I said stiffly, my 4 eyes focusing on anything but Jessica's face. But there may have been an inference of personal connection beyond professional association. Huh? Jessica considered this, her head tilted in a way I had come to recognize as her thinking pose. Is that why that 4-armed guy in requisitions keeps giving me those little purple candies? Are those like alien chocolates or something? They are fermented protein nodules, I corrected, feeling a surge of what humans might call jealousy at the revelation that Dronk from Requisitions had been providing Jessica with traditional courtship offerings. And yes, they are commonly exchanged during the early phases of potential genetic compatibility assessment. Gross? Jessica laughed. And also kind of sweet. But you can tell him I'm not interested in assessing genetic compatibility with anyone from Requisitions. I felt a peculiar lightness in my thoracic cavity at her words. I shall convey your disinterest in appropriate diplomatic terms. You do that, she said, then checked her communication device. Shoot. I have got to run. I'm helping with the Endorian trade delegation this afternoon. Apparently they are confused about why humans insist on wearing clothes during business meetings. A perplexing human custom, I agreed solemnly. The purpose of decorative fabric coverings when your species lacks both protective exoskeletons and modesty glands continues to baffle many Confederation species. Jessica rolled her eyes. A human gesture I had learned indicated good-natured exasperation. This from the guy whose species wears ceremonial antenna covers to formal dinners. They are not mere decorative items, I protested. They serve the crucial function of muffling sensory input during intense social gatherings, which could otherwise overwhelm our neural processing capabilities. So, they are noise-canceling headphones for your antennae. Jessica translated with a smirk. I opened my mouth to object, then closed it. That is not entirely inaccurate. Jessica laughed, that musical sound that had become strangely pleasant to my auditory receptors. See you tomorrow for the cultural briefing on human holidays. I have prepared a whole section on why we give heart-shaped cards to potential mates on Valentine's Day. I shall arrive promptly, I promised. And I shall not shove anyone en route. Good call, she said with a wink. Because not everyone who flips you will buy you lunch afterward. It was not a flip, I called after her retreating form. It was a gravitationally assisted reorientation. Her laughter floated back to me on the breeze. As I turned to head back to the embassy, my comm unit pinged. Attaché Vartul, report to Secure Conference Room 3 immediately. Ambassador Trelvik's voice had a tension I had never heard before. Acknowledged, Ambassador. En route. Something was wrong, very wrong. Ambassador Trelvik never used the secure conference rooms unless the matter involved IVIST-level diplomatic security. Had there been a breach in protocol? Had my unorthodox recruitment of Jessica somehow compromised Confederation security? I hurried back to the embassy, my long legs eating up the distance as humans scattered out of my way. This time, no one needed to be shoved. The embassy security scanners whirred as I passed through, confirming my identity and security clearance. The guards, a mixture of humans and Jorvian peacekeepers, nodded me through with unusual solemnity. Secure Conference Room 3 was located in the sub-basement level, protected by 17 different security measures, including a rather unpleasant molecular disruptor field that would reduce unauthorized beings to their component atoms. I paused at the final security checkpoint, allowing my retinal patterns to be scanned by all 4 eyes. Identity confirmed, Zinak Vartul, 3rd Diplomatic Attaché. The security system announced. Clearance, granted. The massive door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Inside, Ambassador Trelvik was not alone. 3 members of the Confederation Security Council stood around a holographic display, their expressions or equivalent sensory appendage configurations grim. I recognized Admiral Korizak of the Jorvian Fleet, Chancellor Pym of the Andorian Collective, and most worryingly Grand Inquisitor Raz of the Confederation Intelligence Directorate. Atasha Vartul, Ambassador Trelvik acknowledged my presence with a brief dip of her eye stalks. Thank you for your prompt arrival. Ambassador, I replied, formal in the presence of such high-ranking officials. How may I be of service to the Confederation? Grand Inquisitor Raz, a being composed primarily of what appeared to be writhing shadows and anginal flashes of bioluminescence, drifted forward. Your human associate Jessica Parker. Tell us about her. My thoracic cavity constricted. Miss Parker is a cultural consultant recently engaged by the embassy to facilitate human Confederation relations. She has proven quite effective in translating complex cultural concepts between species. And how did you come to meet this human? Admiral Korzak demanded, his massive Jorvian frame tense with military alertness. I hesitated. The truth seemed potentially problematic in this context. But lying to the Security Council would be both futile and treasonous. I encountered her on a public thoroughfare while hurrying to a diplomatic meeting. There was a misunderstanding involving physical contact which led to a cultural exchange regarding human defensive techniques. A misunderstanding. Chancellor Pym's voice was melodious but sharp. Elaborate. I sighed. I attempted to navigate past her using light physical guidance. She responded with a self-defense maneuver that resulted in my involuntary horizontal repositioning. There was a moment of silence. She knocked you down, Admiral Korzak translated bluntly. There was a temporary distribution of gravitational influence, I admitted reluctantly. A strange sound emerged from the shadowy form of Grand Inquisitor Raz. It took me a moment to recognize it as laughter. Ambassador Trelvik, your report was accurate. The human female did indeed flip a Drexian diplomat. It was not a flip, I protested automatically, then realized the absurdity of arguing semantics with the Grand Inquisitor. That is, yes, she demonstrated considerable physical prowess. Ambassador Trelvik's eye stalks rotated toward the holographic display. Show Attaché Vartul, the surveillance footage. The hologram shifted, revealing a 3-dimensional recording of a human facility. Training equipment lined the walls, and a dozen humans in matching attire moved in synchronized patterns. At the center of the group, leading them through the movements, was Jessica. This was recorded yesterday at what humans call a dojo. Ambassador Trelvik explained. Your consultant appears to be an instructor of combat techniques. Aikido is a defensive art, I corrected without thinking. Jessica has explained that it focuses on harmony and the redirection of energy, not aggression. Regardless of its philosophical underpinnings, Grand Inquisitor Raz interjected, your human has skills that are of interest to the Confederation. I felt a chill run through my exoskeleton. Interest in what capacity? The hologram changed again, showing a different facility. This one I recognized immediately as the Andorian embassy across town. The image showed Jessica being escorted through security by a tall Andorian diplomat. Yesterday evening your consultant visited the Andorian embassy, Chancellor Pym said. She spent 3 hours in closed consultation with Ambassador Zrel. She mentioned assisting the Andorian trade delegation, I said, confused. Is there a security concern regarding trade negotiations? The 4 officials exchanged glances. Ambassador Zrel is not involved in trade, Chancellor Pym said softly. He oversees security operations. My confusion deepened. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding about her assignment. Perhaps, Admiral Korzak rumbled. Or perhaps your human is not what she appears to be. The implication hit me like a gravity wave. You suspect Jessica of espionage? That's absurd. She's just a cultural consultant with an interest in interspecies communication and a regrettable tendency to physically reorient diplomats who invade her personal space. Absurd or not, Grand Inquisitor Raz said, shadows writhing more intensely, the fact remains that a human with combat training has infiltrated 2 Confederation embassies and gained access to sensitive information. What sensitive information? I demanded. She has attended cultural briefings, not security councils. The hologram shifted again, showing Jessica in my office, examining my data tablet while I was apparently out of the room. This was recorded 3 days ago, Ambassador Trelvik said, her tone carefully neutral. Can you explain why your consultant was accessing your personal data storage device? I stared at the image, a sinking feeling in all 4 of my stomach chambers. I asked her to review my presentation on Drexian holiday customs while I attended to a call from home. She was helping me make it more relatable to humans. And did you authorize her to access the file labeled Confederation Security Protocols? Grand Inquisitor Raz asked, his voice like ice crystals forming in the void of space. The bottom dropped out of my world. No. That file is restricted. She shouldn't have been able to access it without my biometric authorization. And yet, Admiral Korzak growled, she did. I stared at the hologram, watching as Jessica tapped through screens on my data tablet with practiced ease, her expression focused. This was not the Jessica I knew, the laughing, irreverent human who had become important to me. There must be an explanation, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. There is, Grand Inquisitor Raz said. Your human consultant is a spy. Attaché Vartul. The only question is for whom, and were you complicit in her activities? The accusation hit me like a physical blow. I am a loyal servant of the Confederation. I would never. Then prove it, Admiral Korzak interrupted. Help us apprehend and interrogate Jessica Parker. The thought of Jessica subjected to Confederation interrogation techniques made my exoskeleton crawl. Those techniques were designed for beings with vastly different physiologies than fragile humans. She might not survive. Surely we can simply question her, I suggested, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. If there has been a misunderstanding, the time for gentle questions has passed, Grand Inquisitor Raz said. The security of the Confederation is at stake. We have detected communications from Earth to the Ceridian Empire, the Ceridians, the one species that had refused to join the Galactic Confederation, maintaining a Cold War stance for centuries. If they were recruiting human spies, what would you have me do? I asked, feeling trapped between duty and whatever it was I felt for Jessica. Contact her, Ambassador Trelvik said. Tell her you have sensitive information to share. When she arrives at the embassy, we will detain her for questioning. Use this, Admiral Korzak handed me a small device. It will bypass normal communication security protocols and allow us to monitor your interaction. I took the device, feeling its weight like a black hole in my hand. And if she is innocent, then she has nothing to fear, Grand Inquisitor Raz said, though his tone suggested otherwise. I left the secure conference room with a heavy heart and 4 very confused eyes. Could Jessica really be a Ceridian spy? The evidence seemed damning, but my instincts rebelled against the conclusion. The Jessica who had laughed with me over lunch, who had patiently explained human idioms, who had made my mandibles click with amusement, could she really be an enemy agent? I found a quiet corner of the embassy garden and activated the communication device. Jessica, this is Sunak. I require your assistance with a sensitive matter. Can you come to the embassy immediately? It's urgent. Her response came quickly. On my way. Everything okay? I would prefer to discuss it in person. I replied, aware that the Security Council was monitoring every word. Cryptic much, she texted back. But fine, see you in 20. I spent those 20 minutes in a state of internal turmoil that turned my exoskeleton a mottled purple-gray. If Jessica was a spy, I had compromised Confederation security. If she wasn't, I was betraying her trust. Either way, I had failed someone. My comm unit pinged. She's arrived at the main entrance, Ambassador Trelvik informed me. Bring her to meeting room 5. We will be waiting. Meeting room 5. Not a secure area, but one with hidden security measures, including molecular restraint fields that could immobilize beings of any known species. My stomach's churned. I headed to the main lobby where Jessica was waiting, looking concerned but not suspicious. She wore casual human attire, jeans and a sweatshirt. I had learned they were called rather than the professional outfit she typically wore for embassy work. Zenek, what's going on? You look, well, I was going to say pale, but you are actually kind of purplish gray, which I'm guessing isn't good. Thank you for coming so quickly, I said formally, unable to meet her eyes with any of mine. Please, follow me. As we walked through the embassy corridors, Jessica tried several times to engage me in conversation, but I responded with monosyllables, my mind racing for a way out of this situation. Okay, seriously. What's wrong? She finally demanded, stopping in the middle of the hallway. You are acting weird, even for a Drexian diplomat who's still embarrassed about being flipped onto the sidewalk. It was not a flip, I said automatically. Then sighed. Jessica. I really looked at her with all 4 of my eyes. She stood there, hands on hips, expression concerned rather than guilty or suspicious. If she was a spy, she was an exceptional one. A decision crystallized in my mind. I would not deliver her to Confederation interrogation without being certain of her guilt. Change of plans, I said suddenly, taking her arm and steering her toward a service corridor. We are not going to meeting room 5 after all. Okay? Jessica allowed herself to be guided, but her trained muscles were tense under my grip. Are you going to tell me what's happening? Not here, I whispered, aware that embassy surveillance might be monitoring us. Trust me. The service corridor led to a maintenance exit that emerged into a back alley behind the embassy. As soon as we were outside, I released her arm. Jessica, I need you to listen carefully, I said, checking to ensure we were alone. The Confederation's Security Council believes you are a spy for the Ceridian Empire. They have surveillance footage of you accessing restricted files on my data tablet and meeting with the Andorian security chief. Her eyes widened, but not with guilt, with indignation. What? That's ridiculous. I was helping you with your presentation, like you asked. And I met with the Andorian because they are having issues with human protesters outside their embassy. They wanted advice on de-escalation techniques. Her reaction seemed genuine, but I had to be sure. Then why were you able to access my security files? They require biometric authentication. Jessica's expression shifted from indignant to sheepish. Ah. That. So funny story. Your data tablet unlocks with a retinal scan, right? Yes, I confirmed, confused by this change in topic. Well, when you stepped out for that call, it was still unlocked. I was looking for your holiday presentation, but I accidentally tapped the wrong folder. When I realized it was security stuff, I closed it immediately. It was a plausible explanation, but the surveillance shows you examining multiple screens within the security protocols. Jessica sighed. Look. I was curious, okay? I'm a human in an alien embassy, of course I looked. But I didn't copy anything or take pictures or whatever it is they think I did. I was just being nosy. I wanted to believe her. By the 7 moons, I wanted to believe her. But the Security Council's evidence, And you're meeting with Ambassador Zarel. Like I said, they are having problems with protesters. Some human group called Earth First thinks we are giving away too many resources to aliens. They have been getting aggressive, and since I teach self-defense, the Andorians wanted advice on non-violent response techniques. It made sense. Too much sense to be a hastily constructed cover story. But the Ceridian communications, Jessica, I need to know, have you had any contact with the Ceridian Empire? She stared at me blankly. The who now? Her confusion seemed genuine, but there was one final test. The Ceridians, I repeated. The species that refused to join the Galactic Confederation. Zenak, I have no idea what you are talking about. The only aliens I know about are the ones who have made contact with Earth. There are others? That settled it. No trained spy would pretend ignorance of the Ceridians. It was too easily disproven. I believe you, I said finally, feeling a profound relief wash over me. But the Security Council won't. They were planning to detain you for interrogation when I brought you to Meeting Room 5. Jessica's face paled. Interrogation, like alien waterboarding or something. I am not familiar with waterboarding, but Confederation interrogation techniques are not designed with human physiology in mind. I could not allow it. Not without being certain. So you basically just committed treason to warn me? Jessica asked, looking stunned. Zenak, that's... I don't know whether to be touched or terrified for you. A bit of both would be appropriate, I admitted. We need to clear your name and quickly before they realize I have warned you. Jessica took a deep breath. Okay, so we need to find the real spy, right? Because if the Confederation detected communications with these Ceridian guys, someone must be sending them. I blinked all four eyes in surprise. Rather than panicking or fleeing, she was thinking strategically. Yes, that would be the logical approach. So who else has been hanging around both embassies? Who would have access to your security protocols? She paced the alley, thinking aloud. It would have to be someone who could move freely between different alien delegations. The troubling thought occurred to me. There is one human who has recently gained unusual access to multiple embassies. Jessica stopped pacing. Who? The new custodial supervisor, Trevor Blake. He was hired 3 weeks ago and has clearance to enter all public areas of the embassy, plus some secure areas for maintenance purposes. That's right around when I started, Jessica noted. Could be coincidence, but he also oversaw the installation of new waste reclamation units in both our embassy and the Andorian facility, I added, the pieces starting to fit together. Waste reclamation. You mean like space toilets? Jessica's nose wrinkled in a way I found oddly endearing despite our dire circumstances. They are considerably more sophisticated than toilets, I corrected. They contain molecular analyzers that I stopped suddenly. Molecular analyzers that could be modified to serve as data collection devices. Jessica's eyes widened. Spy toilets? Now I have heard everything. We need proof, I said, my diplomatic mind racing through possibilities. If we can show the Security Council that someone else is responsible for the information leak, where would this Trevor guy keep the data he's collected? Jessica asked. It would have to be somewhere secure but accessible. I thought for a moment. The maintenance level has a supervisor's office. It's isolated from the main embassy systems for security reasons. Perfect hiding spot, Jessica agreed. Can we get there without being seen? There's a service elevator that bypasses the main security checkpoints, I said, but my credentials will trigger an alert if used now since I'm supposed to be delivering you to Meeting Room 5. Jessica grinned. A predatory expression that reminded me she was, evolutionary speaking, descended from apex hunters. Good thing I know how to bypass electronic locks. Those self-defense classes came with some supplementary skills. You continue to surprise me, Jessica Parker, I said, feeling my exoskeleton warm in what I was beginning to recognize as affection. You ain't seen nothing yet, Zenak Vartul, she replied with a wink. Lead the way to these spy toilets. We re-entered the embassy through a service entrance, Jessica showing remarkable stealth for a being without chromatophore camouflage capabilities. The service elevator required a keycard, which Jessica somehow bypassed using only a small device from her pocket and what she called a little trick I learned in college. The maintenance level was dimly lit and hummed with the operational systems that kept the embassy functioning. We moved quietly toward the supervisor's office, a small room nestled between waste reclamation control and atmospheric regulation. "The door has a standard human lock," I whispered. "Can you—" Before I could finish, Jessica had already knelt by the lock, inserting slim metal tools with practiced precision. The lock clicked open within seconds. Like I said, supplementary skills. She grinned at my astonished expression. Inside, the office was sparse and utilitarian. A desk, a chair, several filing cabinets and a computer terminal. "Check the computer," I suggested. "I will examine the physical storage." Jessica sat at the terminal while I began carefully searching the filing cabinets. Nothing seemed immediately suspicious until I reached the bottom drawer of the last cabinet. It was locked. "Jessica, can you—" Once again she was beside me before I could finish asking, lockpicks in hand. "You are getting predictable, Zinak." The drawer slid open to reveal a device I recognized immediately. "A Ceridian quantum transmitter," I breathed. "Highly illegal in Confederation space." "That looks not human," Jessica agreed, examining the crystalline object with its pulsing core. "So Trevor is working for these Ceridian guys?" "It appears so," I confirmed. "But we need more proof. The Security Council will want to know exactly what information was compromised." Jessica turned back to the computer. "Let me see if I can access his files. If he's smart, they will be encrypted." "But—" Her fingers flew across the input device with impressive speed. "Ha! Not smart enough. Look at this." The screen displayed a series of transmissions, each dated and labeled: Drexian Security Protocols, Endorian Defense Capabilities, Earth Vulnerability Assessment. "This is damning evidence," I said grimly. "We need to get this to the Security Council immediately." "One problem," Jessica pointed out. "As soon as we show up, they will probably arrest both of us. We need a way to deliver this information that doesn't involve me getting alien waterboarded." She had a point. We needed a plan. The solution came from an unexpected source. My communit pinged. "Attaché Vartul, your presence is required in meeting room 5 immediately. Where are you and the human female?" Ambassador Trelovik's voice was cold with suspicion. An idea formed in my mind. "Ambassador, I apologize for the delay. We encountered the custodial supervisor, Trevor Blake, who had an urgent maintenance issue requiring attention. We are currently in his office reviewing the situation." There was a pause. The custodial supervisor. What maintenance issue could possibly take precedence over a Security Council directive? "Perhaps you should join us and see for yourself, Ambassador. The issue relates directly to Confederation security." Another pause. Longer this time. "Remain where you are. Security personnel are en route." I ended the communication and turned to Jessica. "We have approximately 3 minutes before security arrives. We need to make it appear that we discovered this evidence accidentally. So we just pretend we were looking for cleaning supplies?" Jessica asked skeptically. "No," I said. "A plan forming. We make it appear that Trevor discovered us snooping and fled. That will turn their suspicion toward him rather than us." Jessica caught on quickly. "So we mess up the office a bit, make it look like there was a struggle." "Precisely," I agreed, already overturning a chair. "Your self-defense expertise might be useful in creating a convincing scenario." Jessica grinned and proceeded to arrange the room to suggest a brief but intense altercation. She even added a few convincing scuff marks to the floor and wall. "Now for the final touch," I said, reaching into my diplomatic pouch and withdrawing a small cylinder. "Drexian defense spray. It will leave distinctive biochemical traces that security scanners will detect." "You carry alien pepper spray?" Jessica asked, raising an eyebrow. "Standard issue for diplomatic personnel in potentially volatile posts," I explained, releasing a small amount of the spray in a pattern consistent with defensive use. "Now we need to appear appropriately disheveled." Jessica mussed her hair and tore her sleeve slightly. "How's this?" "Convincing," I approved. "Now for me." I twisted one of my secondary arms at an uncomfortable but not damaging angle and smudged some dust onto my exoskeleton. "You look like you have been in a fight with a very small, very dusty opponent." Jessica laughed. "Says the human who appears to have been lightly inconvenienced by a ceiling fan," I retorted, pleased when she laughed again. We heard footsteps approaching rapidly. "Ready?" I asked. "Born ready," Jessica replied, assuming a defensive posture beside me. The door burst open and security personnel flooded in, weapons drawn. Behind them came Ambassador Trelvik, Admiral Korczak and Grand Inquisitor Raz. "Attaché Vartul, explain yourself," Ambassador Trelvik demanded. Eye stalks rigid with tension. I straightened up, wincing slightly for effect. "Ambassador, I believe we have identified the source of the security breach. The custodial supervisor, Trevor Blake, has been using modified waste reclamation units to gather intelligence. We discovered this transmitter," I gestured to the Ceridian device. "And these records of transmitted data. When we confronted him, he attacked us and fled." Security personnel immediately moved to examine the evidence while Grand Inquisitor Raz drifted toward us. Shadowy 4 undulating with suspicion. "A convenient discovery," the Inquisitor noted. "And why, precisely, were you investigating the custodial supervisor rather than bringing Miss Parker for questioning as instructed?" Jessica stepped forward before I could respond. "That was my fault, actually. When Zenak told me we needed to go to a meeting, I mentioned that I'd seen Trevor acting suspiciously near the Andorian embassy yesterday. I thought it was just human gossip, but Zenak wanted to check it out before bothering you all with it." Admiral Korczak examined the computer display. "These records confirm transmissions to Ceridian space," he rumbled. "The timestamps match our detection logs." Grand Inquisitor Raz's form shifted closer to Jessica, tendrils of shadow extending toward her. "And you, human? What is your role in all this?" Jessica met the Inquisitor's gaze without flinching, which impressed me given that most beings found direct eye contact with Raz physically uncomfortable. "My role as cultural consultant and apparently amateur detective," she said firmly. "Also, I'm the one who picked the lock on that drawer after Zenak noticed it was suspicious." The Inquisitor withdrew slightly. "You admit to having lock-picking skills." "I admit to having lots of skills," Jessica replied. "Including the one that put Zenak on his back the day we met. But none of my skills include spying for aliens I'd never heard of until today." Ambassador Trelvik's eye stalks swiveled between us. "The evidence does seem implicate the custodial supervisor rather than Miss Parker. Initiate a full embassy lockdown," Admiral Korczak ordered the security team. "Find this Trevor Blake immediately." As the security personnel rushed to comply, Grand Inquisitor Raz drifted closer to me. "You took a significant risk. Attaché Vartul, had you been wrong about Miss Parker's innocence?" "I was not wrong," I said simply. "Jessica has proven her loyalty to the Confederation multiple times today alone." "Indeed," the Inquisitor conceded. "Perhaps your unorthodox approach to diplomacy has merit after all." Ambassador Trelvik approached. Eye stalks now relaxed. "It seems we owe you both an apology. Your quick thinking has prevented a significant security breach. All in a day's work for a cultural consultant," Jessica said lightly, though I could see the tension leaving her shoulders. The next few hours were a blur of security protocols, debriefings and formal statements. Trevor Blake was apprehended attempting to leave the country and was found to have extensive connections to Ceridian intelligence networks. The modified waste reclamation units were discovered in 6 different embassy locations, each quietly harvesting data to be transmitted during scheduled maintenance cycles. By the time we were finally released from questioning, night had fallen over New York City. Jessica and I stood on the embassy steps, exhausted but vindicated. "So," Jessica said, breaking the comfortable silence between us, "that was quite a day." "Indeed," I agreed, "from suspected spy to Confederation hero in the space of a single planetary rotation. All because you trusted me enough to commit light treason," Jessica said, bumping her shoulder against my exoskeleton affectionately. "It was not treason," I protested. "It was an alternative approach to security protocol implementation." Jessica laughed. "You are getting better at human spin doctoring. Soon you won't need a cultural consultant at all." I turned all 4 of my eyes to her. "I believe I shall always require your particular expertise, Jessica Parker." She met my gaze, her expression softening. "Was that a Drexian pickup line, Attaché Vartul?" "If it were," I said carefully, "would it be culturally appropriate?" "Very," she assured me, stepping closer. "Almost as appropriate as this human custom." Before I could process what was happening, she had risen onto her toes and pressed her lips briefly against my mandible in what I recognized as a human kiss. My exoskeleton immediately flushed a deep purple. Fascinating response, Jessica noted with scientific interest. Is that the Drexian equivalent of blushing? It is an involuntary chromatophoric reaction to unexpected stimuli, I said stiffly. So, yes, Jessica translated, grinning. Want to get dinner and discuss more cultural exchanges? I felt my mandibles click in amusement. I would find that most educational. As we walked down the embassy steps together, Jessica slipped her hand into my lower left hand, another human custom I was coming to appreciate. Just promise me one thing, she said. What is that? No more shoving humans on sidewalks. Not everyone who flips you will help you catch a spy. I sighed in defeat. Very well, I concede that it was, technically within certain definitional parameters, possibly classifiable as a flip. Jessica's triumphant laugh echoed down the street, turning heads of both humans and aliens alike. I found I didn't mind the attention. After all, I was walking with the human who had turned my world upside down in more ways than one. And for a Drexian diplomat accustomed to rigid protocols and formal hierarchies, I was discovering that sometimes, being flipped was exactly what you needed.